Whereas the slave must know the master, because the slave's life is in the master's hands. And the master cannot fool a slave, but the slave can fool the master, because the master wants to be fooled. My father, all the years that I lived with him, never dreamed of telling a white person the truth about anything. It simply never entered his mind to do so. He didn't care what they thought. He didn't care if they lived or died. He loathed them. That was very frightening for me to watch. My turn came too. But I could see what had happened. And really, it's important now is that out of this endeavor, what we call the white American has created only the nigger he wants to see. The reason that's important and terrifying and corrupts the youth from here is because when this same white man looks around the world, he sees only the nigger he wants to see.
Incredibly profound. So much there to unpack. But I want to sort of start with Christopher Columbus, because I don't think that this is really as significant today as it was back in the day. But I grew up at a time where we celebrated Christopher Columbus Day. I don't think it is celebrated anymore today like it was. I know that there's been a call to rename it Indigenous Persons Day or something like that. But amongst Italian Americans, particularly here in New York, it's still a celebration. And it's an acknowledgement. And they feel very proud about Christopher Columbus. And although we celebrate this monumental achievement that Christopher Columbus did by so-called finding America, it's a lie. It's a lie to say he founded America, and it's a lie to call it a momentous occasion, because it was an error. It was a mistake. And I remember reading about it. I remember being taught about it. And I remember even realizing that it was taught that it was a mistake, but it still did not make sense as to why we were celebrating this person. It was almost like this mistake is not consequential. It's irrelevant that he made this mistake and then misnamed the people who were living here. Let's not forget, called them Indians when in fact we're not. He was not in India. So, but he names them Indians. So he misnames a whole group of people who still till this day, actually, to some extent, we still call them Indians, you know, and now it's Native Americans. I think that there is an attempt to even relanguage that. But even to bring that up today to, I think, conservatives, to Trumpists, to a bunch of people would be considered woke, or would be considered politically incorrect to call a people Indians when they are not from India. And that's about right. It would be. Not only is it politically incorrect, it'd be just dumb, because you are sitting back almost embracing ignorance, almost embracing and trying to be proud of the fact that you don't know what you're talking about. That is the extremely important thing that Baldwin talks about here. The other thing that is important is his whole overview of history. And I want to end this video sort of touching on the most important part of this that I know I have seen specifically, and I think is so applicable to this day. And that is this idea of the nigger that you want to see. And I was thinking about this political, Politica, I can't think of the ProPublica article about Harlan Crow and this is a billionaire white guy who appears to be somewhat obsessed with wanting to preserve the legacy of Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice, who is one of the most conservative and one of the most anti any attempt to do anything about white supremacy or racism. And as a matter of fact, has been the most strongest voice for preserving what I guess one could call traditional values, but is really preserving racism. And thinking about this guy, he's a black man, grows up in rural parts. I think his grandfather's a slave. I don't know all of the history of Clarence Thomas, but how delicious would it be for someone who I think is probably around Thomas's age, white guy, rich, and a conservative? How delicious wouldn't it be to basically see a black man and see that black man who has as downtrodden a story as possible reach to the highest level of government for a judge or for a litigant or for a jurist, and denounce anybody trying to say this is a racist country, denounce any of the efforts to overcome white supremacy and white racism, denounce and prop up by virtue anybody who would take issue with the history of America, take issue with America's past, and basically say that all of this history is, and all of these attempts to fight against this is anti-American and anti-constitutional. You know, affirmative action, Thomas's dissent in the affirmative action case, he writes his own piece or subnote and basically totally distorts a writing, so much so that the person who wrote this article, this book about the history of this group of blacks, students who excelled even before the era of affirmative action, totally distorts that story. But if you're a guy who's a billionaire, who's a Harlan Crow, who's a conservative, how delicious is that to see that person ascend and see that person be the nigger that you want him to be? And I think about all of the black conservatives and all of the people who are out there. There's this guy from Florida, I think Byron Donaldson is his name, they tried to get to be Speaker of the House. It was a joke, of course. No one was seriously thought that he was going to be Speaker of the House. But he's a black conservative. You've just got them all over the place today, speaking out against those who have been fighting against white supremacy, and how delicious it must be, and how reassuring and freeing it must be for a racist, for someone who's a conservative, for someone who believes that there's nothing wrong with this country, that it's not really racist, that it's not a big deal, the oppression that goes on to blacks today through the justice system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to have these people speaking out. And he brings this up, Baldwin does, and he does it in his own way, and it's so applicable today. It's so important today to understand what's old is new, to understand that the conservative movement, and particularly as it pertains to blacks, is exactly what has been in play since 65, going all the way back. The ignoring of history, the denial of history, the wanting to burn books so that we don't talk about history, like in Florida and Texas and in other states in the South, is all a part of what they always do. This is evidence of racism, not a denial of racism. So that's it for this video. I hope you come back for other videos. In the beginning September, this will be a live stream. I don't know exactly what time that will happen, Eastern Standard Time, but this will become a live stream. You can view it on the YouTube channel or on Stream Me. That's stream.vtip.me. That's stream.vtip.me. As I mentioned before, there's the Mastodon site, which you can join if you're not already on Mastodon, or you can use your Mastodon account to reach me at eric@mastodon.vtip.me. Comment on that, DM me if you want. Share any information, comments, and questions or whatever than what you've seen with the videos here, and I will respond and I'll get back to you. And who knows, maybe we'll have a conversation. Until that time, and until the next time, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you on the next one.